There was a lunch lady named Judy, and everyone loved her, but they loved her food even more. Every single day, the kids would rush to the lunchroom just to eat her delicious food, but one day, a boy in 7th grade noticed something strange. In the back of the kitchen, he saw a mysterious door he had never seen before, and he's been buying lunch for a year straight. He then went to the principal's office and told him what he saw. The principal then made his way down to the lunchroom and asked Judy about the door. She obviously played dumb for a little bit, but eventually showed him. And what he saw inside made him freeze in absolute horror. Inside were multiple teenagers' dead bodies, completely cut up and strung up on the wall. Judy then looked at the principal with a smile on her face and said, "How do you think my food tastes so good? This is the reason why." Judy was fired and arrested and is now serving 105 years in prison. The school and all the students were disgusted when they found out about what happened, and they couldn't believe they have been eating human meat for this long.
This is how a TikTok video and a rifle ended in death. It was 2023 in Florida. Mariah Clayton was 20 years old and was recording a TikTok video of herself in an apartment on the 23rd of May. She happened to be, for some unknown reason, using a rifle as a prop in her TikTok video. The skit she intended to post was apparently supposed to be recorded by 19-year-old Anaya Womack. Mariah was intending on popping out of the shower while using the weapon as a prop. However, during the filming of the video, the weapon discharged and shot Anaya in the abdomen, killing her. She was rushed to hospital but tragically could not be saved. Now, initially, Mariah had actually told police that her and her friend had found Anaya on the side of the road having been shot. However, the truth was eventually revealed. There had been multiple witnesses to this crime. Mariah pleaded guilty to manslaughter and has been given 5 years in prison and then 5 years probation. Anaya was described as a social butterfly and someone who would do anything for anyone.
This creepy dentist was sentenced to 180 years in prison, as if going to the dentist wasn't already scary enough. So this is Joseph Clarence Cox. Joseph was initially arrested in April of 2021 after some really disturbing allegations were made. You see, 8 former employees of Joseph's testified that he had assaulted them during business hours. And these assaults in the middle of the workplace in the middle of the day went beyond touching and groping. In fact, 2 of the employees stated that they were raped and sodomized. But this abuse wasn't limited to employees. You see, 3 former patients actually testified that Joseph had abused them while they were undergoing dental work. So basically, this guy's dental office was an absolute house of horrors. In the middle of the day, during working hours, he was assaulting employees all throughout the building. And then when it came to patients, Joseph was giving them the drugs, getting them ready for procedures, and then began touching them and doing things to them while they were under. So yeah, once all of this came to light, Joseph's wife of 10 years immediately divorced him. And after a couple years, Joseph was eventually sentenced to 180 years in prison. Needless to say, he's going to be in there for a very, very long time, thank God. Here's a GPS image of what the dental office looks like. I can't tell if this is a new clinic or what, but it's absolutely unfathomable to think of the horrors that this building has witnessed. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast that I co-host with my wife, Courtney, Murder in America. It's available on all streaming platforms now.
Jacksonville, Florida. Obviously, there's a bunch of gamers and obviously the spectators watching them. There's this gamer. His name is David Katz, or the gaming community knows him as Bread. He has won many Madden tournaments before, but like he's like really toxic when he does win. Talk shit. Whenever he wins, he doesn't really react like happy. He just like stays like this. At this tournament, he had lost. I don't know if he lost multiple games or if he just lost one game. And it gets tight. So then he ends up leaving the little venue that they're at. Comes back with 2 handguns, and he starts fucking open firing at whoever's there, the spectators, the fucking gamers. He ends up killing 2 gamers, and he ends up injuring 11 people in the crowd. And there's a video, like, cause it was live stream, bro. The guy who got shot, who was playing in the video, you see like a red laser start pointing at his chest, and then it cuts, but like the audio's still there, and then you hear like the gunshots of like him shooting everybody and stuff. Imagine raging so hard you gotta kill.
I know games make people tight and shit. Sometimes they make you throw the fucking controller, get violent and shit, but like to the point where you fucking have to kill somebody is crazy, bro. I'm Johnson.
They just
got a lot of good games going on. It's a lot. It's gonna be hard to get them on screen. It's not a tough out.
Oh, I saw it. Saw it, right? He beat him?
I'm guessing so, bro, because that was like the first one he fucking shot, and motherfucker ends up killing himself after.
Oh, of course, bro.
Yeah.
Of course. They always have that fucking
that mindset.
Cowardly end.
Yeah.
The guy you just saw in that video walking the red carpet is convicted pedophile Jackie Jahaj. In 2016, Jackie was jailed in England for 4 years after assaulting 2 15-year-old girls. Jackie had apparently been prowling the streets of England, telling young impressionable girls that he was a Hollywood film producer, and then offering them alcohol. So like I said, he was eventually found guilty of assaulting these 2 young girls, and he was put on the English Sex Offenders Registry. However, in 2023, Jackie was a part of a film production that hired over 90 children as extras. And in the footage, even though he's a convicted sex predator, Jackie was allowed to walk the fake red carpet, all while some of these minors and younger actors touched him on the shoulders. Now, obviously, this footage made a lot of people very angry. Not only the fact that this convicted pedophile was given access to so many kids, but also that nobody had checked his prior records before hiring him to work on this project. Oh yeah, and there's the fact that he never let any of the producers or people involved with the film know that he was a convicted pedophile. Eventually, though, he was rearrested after this footage surfaced, and he was then charged with a number of things, including failure to identify yourself as a pedophile. But yeah, it's scary how these people are so good at pretending that they're normal, when on the inside, they're some of the most evil creatures to walk the planet. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
This might be the most disturbing young killer ever, and this case is just gut-turning. In 2011, Daniel Bartlam, who was 14 years old at the time, ran out of his burning house with his younger brother and dog, and they waited for the emergency services to arrive. When the police questioned Daniel, he told them that someone had broken into the house and harmed his mother and then set the house on fire. But after this initial statement, Daniel told the police the very disturbing and sickening truth. He said that he crept into his mother's room at night with a claw hammer in his hand. He then stood over his own mother while she slept, and as he looked down on her, he raised the hammer and hit her in the head 7 times. And after he was done, he poured gasoline around her bedroom and then set the whole room on fire. The disturbing thing is, Daniel's mother was only identified through her dental records, meaning her body was completely burnt beyond recognition. And as the police searched the house, they found the hammer used in the attack in Daniel's bedroom. And they also found a document on his computer where he written a story featuring a character with his name who murdered his mother. Another disturbing part about this case was that a popular TV show in the UK called Coronation Street had recently showed a story where one of the characters murdered a woman with a hammer. And the storyline in the show resembled a striking resemblance of what Daniel had done. The police also found TV clips of the scene from the episode of Coronation Street, along with other violent scenes from popular films on Daniel's computer. The media then gave Daniel the nickname the Coronation Street Killer. Daniel's stepfather had also spoken about Daniel's behavior before the awful incident took place. And he said that Daniel had plastic boxes full of Star Wars and Doctor Who figures, and Daniel would just urinate in those boxes. Daniel also defecated all over his bedroom. And what's strange is that Daniel was raised by his mother in a very stable home, and by all accounts, Daniel was a normal young boy. The family had moved to a different area in 2009, and that's the year he began to become more reclusive, spending most of his time in his bedroom playing video games and watching horror films. His stepfather blamed the video games and the horror films on why Daniel murdered, but I don't believe that. Daniel said that he killed his mother because of an argument that they had when she called him a freak. But with no evidence of abuse in the home, the motive is still unclear. Daniel was then found guilty of the murder of his mother. This whole case is just so sad, especially because everyone that knew Daniel's mother said that she lived for her children and was a warm, loving mother. And for someone to do this to their own mother is just absolutely sickening.
Kenny Veach disappeared after finding a mysterious cave near Area 51, and it's one of the creepiest missing person cases I've ever heard of. So Kenny was an avid hiker of 20 plus years and a YouTuber who would create videos of his solo hiking journeys in the deserts of Nevada and California. He became so comfortable and confident hiking alone that he would often camp for several days without a GPS, a compass, or a map. In June of 2014, Kenny came across a video titled "Son of an Area 51 Technician" and left a comment that would gain a lot of attention. Kenny detailed a scary experience he recently had after finding a mysterious hidden cave near Area 51, or more specifically, near the Nellis Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert. Kenny said that the entrance of the cave was shaped like a perfect capital M, but as soon as he got close to the entrance, he felt unusual vibrations throughout his entire body. He said the closer he got to the cave's entrance, the worse the vibrating got, and then an indescribable fear came over him. He couldn't explain it, but he was so scared that he ran out. In the comment, Kenny went on to say that he solo hikes across mountaintops that many people wouldn't dare to go, and that he's been in more caves than he can count. He said he plays with rattlesnakes for fun, but this particular cave was unlike anything he had ever encountered. His comment on this video kind of went viral, and a lot of people were pushing for him to go back and try to find the cave to document it. Almost every single comment was urging him to go back, all except for one that read, quote, "Do not go back there. If you find that cave entrance, do not go in. You won't get out." End quote. But this didn't stop Kenny, and on November 10th, 2014, he set out once again to try and find the M Cave. It was originally only supposed to be an overnight hike, so he kissed his girlfriend goodbye and told his family that he'd be back the next day. But Kenny disappeared that day, and he's never been seen again. When he never came back home, his girlfriend reported him missing, and a massive search was launched. Authorities began searching an abandoned vertical mine shaft that was in one of Kenny's recent videos, and there they found his cell phone. Several miles away, they also located Kenny's car. Other than this, no trace of Kenny has ever been found, and because of the nature of his disappearance, it sparked chilling conspiracy theories as to what could have happened to him. One theory is that Kenny became lost or injured and succumbed to the elements, or he could have possibly been killed by a wild animal. Another theory is that he accidentally fell down a mine shaft somewhere and just hasn't been found yet. But one terrifying theory that people have come up with is that the M Cave that Kenny found and was trying to locate again was the entrance to a secret government facility, and that his disappearance was due to him stumbling across government secrets in hopes of keeping him quiet. And of course, the biggest conspiracy theory that people have come up with is that Kenny disappeared after encountering aliens since the cave was near Area 51. But obviously these are all just theories and have never been proven. A more realistic theory has been brought up by his girlfriend. She says that it's possible that Kenny died by suicide as he reportedly struggled with his mental health in the years leading up to his disappearance. She mentioned that he left behind his camera, so he obviously was not going on that hike to film anything as most people thought he was. This would make sense considering a few life changes before he went missing. Just the year prior, Kenny suddenly quit his job to become an inventor. He reportedly invented an improved version of a toilet paper holder, and he even submitted the concept to Shark Tank. Kenny also tried to sell his house, but under one odd condition. He demanded that the new owner had to hire him as a caretaker and continue to let him decorate the house in his own style. Because of this weird condition, he never had any offers. Regardless, it's now been 10 years, and Kenny's disappearance remains unsolved.
What happened on this island is like something out of a horror film. This is the case of the Cannibal Island, where the prisoners were forced to eat each other. It was May 1933, and Joseph Stalin was in charge of the Soviet Union. Joseph had plans to create so-called labor camps. He wanted to, A, get rid of what he felt were undesirable people from normal society, and B, see if he could create self-sustaining communities out of them. No one had any idea just how dark things were about to get. A remote island in the Siberian River was named Nazino Island, and this is where Joseph picked to banish many members of the public to. Now, initially he decided to send criminals and people that he felt didn't contribute to society. These were people like unemployed people. However, those working for Joseph soon started picking on random members of the public. These would be people that if they didn't have like documentation, like ID for whatever reason, they would also get banished to the island. Now, the island was very small for the amount of people that would eventually be placed there. They dropped off over 6,000 civilians. Shockingly, there was no food or shelter for these people. There was also no way of anyone providing anything for themselves. Within days, unsurprisingly, things turned incredibly dark. Without anywhere to sleep or hide from harsh conditions on the island, nearly 300 people failed to survive past the first night. They had completely perished. The immune systems of the inhabitants were low due to the harsh conditions. They were also low due to the stress of the situation. Many of them started falling ill and dying from disease and illness. Others started starving to death. Then the survivors thought that they would be saved as the Soviets arrived on the island to give out some rations. However, this would just prove to be even more cruel behaviour. It was nothing more than some flour that they were provided with, and people tried mixing it with water to make it substantial enough to eat. However, they died of suffocation breathing in the powder. After days of watching people around them die, the surviving inhabitants decided to do the only thing that they thought was left to do. They went to extreme measures, and one described how he would prey on prisoners who seemed like they were just about to die. He would then eat their livers and their hearts. Others talked of how some people tied others to trees and cut off their body parts in order to eat them. Now, guards closely watched what was going on the island, and anyone who tried to escape would be shot by them. Of the original 6,000 prisoners who were dumped on the island, by the time it was eventually closed down, just 2,000 remained alive. They were, however, riddled with diseases, severely malnourished, and also traumatized. The horrific reality of what had happened to people on Cannibal Island was actually hidden for a long period of time. It was gradually revealed, and some of the guards were put in prison for a short time, but the full story didn't really break until 1994. Local people often visit the island to lay flowers and pay tribute to the victims who died in such traumatizing, horrific circumstances.
Unsolved mystery caught on tape. One of the most well-known missing person cases on YouTube, specifically because of the video. In the beginning, you're gonna see him walk into the airport. He's gonna go inside the airport medical center. From there, he just runs out, and then that's the last time they ever see him.
Oh,
so these are his final moments.
He's naked?
Nah, just like just shorts and shirt.
I never seen like
these ones.
Yeah, it's like the extended version.
That's him when he climbs over the gate. His name was Lars Matank, and it was going on a boys trip to Bulgaria. He's from Germany, and it wasn't until the day before they left, they went to this local bar. They got into altercation, and then later that day, he says that these big-ass Russian guys attacked me. During that fight, he got injured in his ear, and then his friends was like, before we do leave, go to the doctors, get your ears checked out. The doctors tell him that he has a ruptured eardrum. He was like, delay your plane, just rest a couple days, and then from then, you could dip. When he tells his friends automatically say, I bet, we'll delay our flights, we'll stay with you, so then we could all go back to Germany. But then Lars was like, you know what, nah, it's fine, bro, you guys just go, I'll stay behind.
Yeah, I'll be like, you're bugging, bro.
Exactly. After his friends fly out and he finds a hotel is when weird stuff starts happening with his behavior, to be specific. That night at midnight, he calls his mom. He tells his mom, make sure you turn off my credit card, my debit card, everything. Then they explain why, and then he hung up. And then an hour later,
the man you saw in that video, Richard Ragland, went on to drown that day, and this GoPro footage actually captured his final moments of life. Before his death, Richard actually served in the National Guard. Everybody remembered him as having the biggest heart and being a very smart guy. However, on June 4th, 2017, a freak accident would cause Richard to drown in the water he was swimming in Georgia. To this day, nobody knows exactly what killed Richard or what forced him under the water, but his friends that were with him that day stated that he went under the water. They tried to help him, but there was no way they could get him back up to the surface. So after his death, Richard's family mourned their loss. But it wasn't until years later when a diver actually recovered that GoPro sitting at the bottom of that water. The diver's name was Rich Abernathy. He has a YouTube channel where he goes into bodies of water and dives. And he was diving in that same water in Tennessee when he came across a GoPro. And when he looked at the contents of that GoPro, the connection was made that this was Richard Ragland, the man who had drowned there only a few years prior. I'm going to play you a little bit more of that video. It is just some really haunting stuff.
Being with brothers and sisters, we live in life. We live in life. We live in life. See, the thing is, one common goal that we all share is the same goal.
If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
Kaylana Turner's body has just been found a year after she mysteriously disappeared, and only 900 feet from where her car was found abandoned. This story is incredibly heartbreaking. So, 28-year-old Kaylana disappeared on March 10th, 2023. The night before she disappeared, she was staying with a friend in Silsbee, Texas, but when that friend left for work, Kaylana appeared lost and confused. She reached out to a friend in Austin and told him that she didn't know where she was, so it's believed that she was planning on driving to Austin. But later that day, she ended up at a house in Tomball, Texas, and fell asleep in her car in the driveway. The woman who owned the house didn't know Kaylana at all, and when she refused to leave the driveway, the woman called the police. When police arrived, they tried to open up her door, but Kaylana backed up and almost hit one of the deputies. She then crashed into a fence on the front lawn. A deputy then grabbed a 2x4 piece of wood and broke in Kaylana's driver's side window, which made her drive off, and she ended up crashing into a wooded area about a mile away. She then got out and started running barefoot into the woods, leaving behind her purse and phone. This was the last time that she was ever seen alive. Her family says that she was having a mental health crisis, likely from a recent change in medication. Kaylana had cardiac issues as well as asthma, but she also had PTSD, and she was recently prescribed a different medication for that. Her family believes that she may have had a bad reaction to the new meds, and in the 4 days before she went missing, she had hardly slept at all. So when she woke up in that woman's driveway, she was disoriented and likely in a fight or flight mode. Over the year that Kaylana was missing, there were multiple searches for her, but it was like she vanished into thin air. That is until April 19th of this year, when Texas EquiSearch was conducting a search for her on a private property in Magnolia. This was actually supposed to be their final search for her, but during that final search, they stumbled across human remains in a heavily wooded area. And after comparing dental records, it was confirmed that the remains belonged to Kaylana. What's incredibly sad is that her body was found only 900 feet from where her car was found abandoned a year ago. Her cause of death is still being determined, but authorities say no foul play is suspected. Kaylana's family says that the day she went missing, authorities treated her like a fugitive and didn't realize that she was in the middle of a mental health crisis. Instead, they reacted to her in such a hostile way, and it's left many wondering, had they realized that she was in the middle of a mental health crisis, if this would have turned out any different. Authorities were telling the family and putting out information that just wasn't true, which included sightings of Kaylana, and it really seems like authorities just didn't take the case seriously from the very beginning. Just by looking at the Facebook page created to help finding her, it's so clear how much Kaylana was loved by everyone. She was a person that was filled with love and kindness, and there truly was just no one like her. I'm wishing her family nothing but peace and healing during this horrible time, and I'm hoping that more answers will come to light.
These are people who killed their families reacting to their prison sentences. Up first is Alex Murdaugh, who murdered his wife Maggie and their 22-year-old son Paul on June 7th, 2021. Alex called Maggie on June 7th, 2021 and asked her to meet him at the Murdaugh family lodge. He wanted the two of them to travel together from there to see his father, Randolph Murdaugh, who was actually terminally ill. Maggie texted a friend saying Alex sounded fishy and was up to something. After parking her car at the house, she walked to the dog's kennel where she found her son Paul. Alex Murdaugh then called the police from his cell phone at 10:06 p.m. saying he had discovered the bodies of his wife Maggie and their younger son Paul near the dog kennels at the family's hunting lodge. Each had been shot multiple times in the head, wrists, and chest with different guns. Alex Murdaugh claimed that at the time of the killings, he had been with his mother, who has dementia. However, cell phone data, including videos containing Alex's voice, placed him at the scene before their deaths. In October 2021, it was revealed that the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division had regarded Alex as a person of interest in the homicide since the start of the investigation. The investigation was heavily criticized by Murdaugh's defense attorney during the entire trial, and the crime scene was spoiled by rain. The police reportedly failed to collect various evidences and allowed family members and friends to walk through the scene. Alex Murdaugh was then arrested in July 2022 after the Colleton County Grand Jury issued an indictment charging him with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime in the deaths of his wife Maggie and their son Paul. The indictment stated that Alex shot his wife with a rifle and his son with a shotgun. Alex Murdaugh pleaded not guilty, and prosecutors said that they would seek life in prison without the possibility of parole and not the death penalty. And what I'm about to show you right now is Alex Murdaugh's reaction to getting that exact sentencing.
And I tell you again, I respect this court, but I'm innocent. I would never, under any circumstances, hurt my wife Maggie, and I would never, under any circumstances, hurt my son Paul.
Well, and it might not have been you. It might have been the monster you become when you take 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 opioid pills. Maybe you become another person. All right, Mr. Murdaugh, I sentence you for the term of the rest of your natural life. And officers may carry forth on the imposition.
Bro, Disneyland.
Oh, the dark side of Disney?
The dark side, or like the dark ages of Disney. Back in like the mid 90s, early 2000s, they would have like a lot of malfunctions with rides. That's bloody period of time or whatever. And like they wouldn't really do anything about it. They would just try to cover everything up because
they want to have the reputation that
it's like a happy ass place to be, whatever. But I'm gonna talk about two cases. It was a worker who was dressed in the Pluto costume. He was 30 years old and he's been working there for like 8 years. During the parade of Beauty and the Beast, he got ran over by one of the...
What, you're talking about like the parade shit?
The float, yeah. He got ran over by that and tried to cover it up. And another thing too that I didn't know is that back then, like, they weren't allowed to call 911.
Nah, yeah, they wasn't, bro. They had to wait till they left the park, or if anybody died or anything like that, they would report it outside of the park, bro. They would never say that they got into an accident inside the park or got hurt inside the park.
And there was another case. There's this boat that when it docks, right, it's supposed to dock slow and nice, but this one keeps docking fast. And a lot of staff members, a lot of people would complain about it, saying like, this shit needs to be worked on, it needs maintenance, but they would just ignore it because like, it's fine, don't worry about it. And there was one time where it was docking, an employee that was outside where the dock is at saw a rope, tied the rope onto a pole, and that ended up, since the ship was going too fast, it was pulling the rope tight and ended up taking a chunk out of the boat, which ended up
somebody's face,
flying into somebody's face, ended up killing them. They tried to cover that up because when the investigators came to see what the fuck happened,
they said that he jumped off or some shit.
They basically stalled them for 4 hours while they had Disney employees clean up the mess so it would look like nothing really happened.
No fucking way.
Yeah.
When you were talking about this whole dark age and shit, I thought you were gonna mention like, if you see the old like Mickey costumes, you could put it up and shit. Like they look mad creepy and stuff.
You ever seen that video of
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Ever go in the woods of southeast Oklahoma? On a foggy day in 1970, a group of high school kids are cruising the back roads of southeast Oklahoma. One of the boys had to pee, so they pulled over. He got out of the truck, walked about 50 yards into the woods so that he couldn't be seen. He heard a tree snap, looked up, and he's staring in the eyes of a creature 3 foot taller than any man. It had matted hair, red eyes, and blood dripping off its chin. The boys ran as fast as they could back to the truck, yelling, "Start the truck, start the truck." But what happens next is terrifying. The boys go to the sheriff's department, and when the deputy goes out to investigate, all he sees is animal carcasses everywhere, and the legend of the Green Hill Monster was born.
This is the disturbing case of the body at the bottom of the pool. In 2011, 36-year-old Marie Joseph was enjoying a day out at a local swimming pool in Massachusetts. During the day, she actually went down a water slide and collided with a little boy. She had seemingly hit her head, and the boy decided to go and tell some lifeguards what happened. He actually told 2 separate lifeguards. The first one told him that he was on his break, and the second lifeguard just evidently did not follow this up. Marie's body lay on the bottom of the pool for 2 entire days. Marie's boyfriend reported that he felt like something was wrong when she was just not returning his calls or texts. What about the friends that Marie had been with at the pool that day? They realised she wasn't there anymore and they just presumed that she'd left and gone home. 2 health inspectors reportedly visited the pool and found that the water was incredibly cloudy. They believe that this played a major role in why her body was undiscovered, just laying under the water for days.
Never go down Evangeline Road, Louisiana. 2015, a group of urban explorers go searching for a local legend. This creature is said to be the spawn from a satanic ritual performed by a group of outcast circus performers in the late 1900s. They were deep in the woods and night was fast approaching, so they decided to set up camp. But it's what happened when one of the explorers went to pee that sends shivers down my spine. It was way darker than normal that night. The man walked about 10 feet from the fire and behind a tree. But when he turned around to go back to camp, everyone was gone, and the woods was completely silent. He called up a friend to tell him what had happened so that if he doesn't come back, someone would know why. When the Rangers got to the campsite, the scene was horrific. Blood and body parts were everywhere. What happened to the explorers, and why didn't he tell his friend that the others were dead?
Can you tell a place has a dark history just from looking at it? I'm going to be showing you photos from inside a place with a very dark past, and we're gonna see. This is a series, so make sure you're following along and remember this room. Some of you true crimers might recognize this place already, but this is the home of JonBenet Ramsey. JonBenet was just 6 years old when her body was found in the wine cellar of this house, which was this room. If something felt off when you were looking at this photo earlier, you were onto something. We're still not entirely sure what happened the night of JonBenet's death, but many people seem to think that the parents had something to do with it. And part of the reason is this green staircase right here. This is the staircase where an incredibly bizarre ransom note was found. This note was found on Mrs. Ramsey's stationery and was 3 pages long, meaning the killer was in the house for a while before getting JonBenet. And that's normally not the case with these kinds of crimes. People have also noticed that $118,000 is a very strange amount for a ransom. The Ramsey parents were actually cleared of the crime in 2008. And this home is now owned by a couple who, to no one's surprise, has completely remodeled it. I don't personally think that I could live inside this home, but let me know in the comments if you feel like you could.
This is a bittersweet case. On February 1986, 29-year-old Detective Stephanie Lazarus broke into her ex-boyfriend's house and murdered his wife Sherry Rasmussen in a fit of rage and jealousy. Stephanie successfully got away with murder for 23 years due to connections with the Los Angeles Police Department. Despite there being evidence against her, she was barely questioned. The crime was initially deemed to be a robbery gone wrong, but Sherry's family was convinced that Stephanie was involved since she was jealous that Sherry and John were happily married. When John returned home from work that evening, Sherry was found shot multiple times in the chest. Reports show that Stephanie had threatened Sherry at her workplace, stating, "If I can't have John, then nobody else will." In the meantime, Stephanie went on to start her own private investigation firm, and the case went cold. But 23 years later, on February 2009, a cold case detective squad decided to reinvestigate the case, and that's when they discovered that DNA was obtained from a bite mark on Sherry's body. And of course, that bite mark was a perfect match to Stephanie Lazarus. On March 8, 2012, Stephanie was convicted and sentenced to 27 years to life in prison and will be eligible for parole in 2039.
Disappeared after school, returned 4 years later, but different. Who am I really? You'd never guess who I truly am. My name is Kanhaya Singh. After over 4 years, I suddenly emerged from nowhere. My father, drowning in relief, accepted me without any doubts. But my mother, she felt something wasn't right. There was this slight alteration in my behavior, an odd gleam in my eyes she didn't recognize. Even though I spoke, walked, and looked like her son, something was amiss. Whispers became louder, suspicions intensified. My father, however, refused to acknowledge this eerie feeling, choosing to believe I was truly his son. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, little nuances betrayed my true identity. Driven by her maternal instincts, my mother grew more adamant. When she demanded a DNA test, I staunchly declined, thickening the air with tension. The raw truth. I wasn't Kanhaya at all. I was an imposter who had taken his place, living under their roof, deceiving his kin. How would you have reacted if you were in my family's position? Let me know your thoughts in the comments on my situation.
This is why rental houses terrify me. So Paula was staying at an Airbnb outside of Detroit by herself. Her job had sent her there for training. And immediately in the house, she starts feeling like something is off. There was always weird shadows outside the windows, and she would hear footsteps on the roof really late at night. She ends up locking herself outside of the rental the next day, but it's not a huge deal because the property manager actually lives in the house next to it. So she asks him about the footsteps she hears on the roof at night, and he says that they have lots of raccoons in the area, but she kind of knows that it's not a raccoon. He lets her back into the house and tells her that her keys are on the bedside table, which that's kind of weird. How did he know that? Another thing about the property manager is he's an older gentleman, so he listens to his TV on full volume like all night, and she can hear it from her house. So the next night, it's kind of the same thing. Weird shadows outside the window, creaking on the roof, and then her neighbor's insanely loud television. And Paula decides that she's had enough, so she opens her side door to go over to her neighbor's house to tell him to knock it off. And that's when she stops in her tracks. She can see his TV through the window. And on it is Paula, standing at the door, looking out the window. And then she sees him get up out of his chair, walk over to the window, and smile at her.
This couple tortured and killed their live-in nanny over a member of Boyzone. 21-year-old Sophie Leonette was excited to be working as an au pair in London. She was hired by seemingly nice couple Sabrina and Usem. Little did she know Sabrina had a dark side. Sabrina was very much in charge of the household, and soon this idyllic job turned into a complete nightmare for Sophie. She was barely paid and they started to abuse her. She was losing a disturbing amount of weight, and neighbours said that when they saw her she seemed down and depressed. Bizarrely, Sabrina mistakenly convinced her that Sophie was actually spying on the couple for Sabrina's ex, Mark Walton. Mark was actually in the original lineup of the boy band Boyzone, and this was completely untrue. The pair didn't even know each other. Heartbreakingly, police would later find an entry in Sophie's diary titled "Why Me?" The pair would beat her and whip her regularly. When neighbours noticed a bad smell and smoke coming from the property, they alerted police. Authorities discovered a grill with chicken on in the back garden, along with a burn pit, a human nose and fingers. The couple tried to blame each other in court, but ultimately they were both sentenced to 30 years in prison.
The CEO was charged for a murder that happened 30 years ago. On September 5th, 1992, 25-year-old computer engineer Lori Houts was found strangled and dead in her car in Mountain View, California. When Lori was found, the rope was still around her neck and her footprints were found inside of her car on her windshield. Police immediately put all their attention on Lori's boyfriend's roommate, John Kevin Woodward, who was 28 years old at the time. He became a prime suspect when police found out that he was jealous that Lori was in a relationship with his roommate. In 1992, investigators were able to find John's fingerprints outside of Lori's car, but they were never able to prove that he was inside her car. He didn't have an alibi for the night of Lori's murder, and they tried to convict him twice, but they were never able to because there was insufficient evidence. However, in 2020, investigators started to re-examine Lori's case and found more evidence against John. They analyzed 80 fingerprints and used new developments in forensic science to analyze the rope used in Lori's murder. This is when the test results indicated more fingerprints matching John's, and he was linked to the rope used in Lori's murder. At this point, John lives in the Netherlands and he's now 58 years old. And he's also the CEO of a tech company called Reed Tech. This guy was living the dream. But that all came to an end on July of this year when police were waiting for him at the airport in New York, and when he landed, they arrested him. He now faces life in prison if he's convicted.
I've been ordering the same pizza every day for 10 years, until the employees uncovered this horrifying truth. Pizza! My name is John. For an entire decade, like clockwork, every evening at 7:30 p.m., I placed the exact same order from the local Pizza Hut. A medium-sized pepperoni pizza with an extra helping of cheese, occasionally adding a side of garlic bread. This ritual, for me, was comforting, predictable. Karen, an employee at the pizzeria, had also come to anticipate my daily call. She would even prep my order minutes before my call, knowing I'd be on the line soon. The aroma of my order became familiar, a reminder of a day ending. However, one fateful evening, the expected call from me never came. Silence. Not just for that day, but several days after. Concerned, Karen retried my number multiple times over the week, but was only greeted by my voicemail, which began sounding hauntingly empty to her. As days turned into weeks with no word, Karen's worry deepened. She recalled our countless short conversations, the times I mentioned it being alone, or the soft laughter we shared over minor pizza toppings changes. Unable to shake the bad feeling, she finally made the decision one evening after her shift to come check on me at my listed address. The streets were dim, with only a few lampposts illuminating her way. Upon arriving, a palpable sense of dread hung in the air. The windows of my home were dark, save for a faint flickering light, probably from a TV left on. She hesitated for a moment, took a deep breath, and knocked. No immediate answer, but from the depths of the house, she heard a muffled groan, an indication of something amiss. Do you want to uncover the mystery behind the door? Leave a comment for part 2 and don't forget to subscribe.
Lori Vallow, the Doomsday Mormon murderer, was just found guilty of killing her 2 children. And those aren't the only deaths she was involved with. So Lori had married her husband Charles in the year 2006, and together they adopted his grandnephew JJ. But over the years, Lori became obsessed with a man named Chad Daybell and his Doomsday Mormon-influenced teachings. Remember, he claimed that he lived 31 different lives on different planets and that Lori herself had lived 21 different lives. So in February of 2009, Lori informed her husband Charles, remember they were still married, that she no longer cared about their son JJ, their adopted grandnephew. She claimed that she was the reincarnated wife of Joseph Smith, the guy who created Mormonism, and she vanished for 58 days straight. Now that month, Charles filed for divorce. He said that his life was being threatened. He said that Lori had stolen his truck, $35,000 had gone missing from his bank accounts. And he even sought a protective order against his own wife, meaning that his wife Lori could not approach him in any way. But then, on July 11th, 2019, Charles was murdered by Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Apparently, Alex claimed that he had confronted Charles about abusing Lori, his sister. Charles had swung at him with a baseball bat, he had retrieved a gun, and he shot and killed Charles on the spot. Now, initially, the police did not pursue this matter any further, but in 2021, Lori was charged with conspiracy to kill Charles. Now, at first, no one really thought too much of this, but something was about to happen that would change the course of how authorities would view Charles's death. So Chad Daybell, the entire time that he had been preaching to Lori and connecting with her on this soul level, had been married as well. And a few months after Charles, Lori's husband, was shot and killed, his wife, Tammy Daybell, was also found dead. Apparently, in October of 2019, she was shot at by a masked man in her own driveway. Then, 10 days later, she was found dead in her own bed. And at first, her death was attributed to natural causes. Chad claimed that she had had a terrible cough the day before she died. But people questioned this immensely because at the time she had been training for a marathon, she was perfectly healthy. And just 2 weeks after she died, I mean, she was married to Chad at the time that she died, Chad went and married Lori Vallow. So now, in a short period of time, both of their spouses had died under extremely suspicious circumstances, and they were married. But just a few months after her death, her body was actually exhumed because people weren't accepting the story. And it was just revealed this year during Lori Vallow's trial that they discovered that she had been asphyxiated, so strangled by somebody else. But keep in mind, this entire time, Lori still had her 2 children, JJ and Tylee, to look after. So what were they doing? Well, both children had apparently disappeared off the face of the earth in September of 2019, 2 months before Chad's wife Tammy was murdered. Tylee had last been seen at Yellowstone National Park early in the month, and a few weeks later, the last video footage of JJ ever was recorded on a doorbell camera in his own neighborhood. On September 24th, Lori contacted JJ's school to let him know that she was withdrawing him. I'm going to run out of time though, so I have to do a part 3.
I had a message from this lady a couple of days ago, and I can remember seeing her in the news previously and being absolutely horrified by her story. This is Laura Galazzi, and at 25 weeks pregnant, her unborn son was decapitated during his birth. Laura went into labour in March 2014 at Ninewells Hospital in Dundee, and she was assigned a doctor that would set in motion a series of events that would lead to the death of her son. Dr. Laxman decided on a natural delivery for Laura, despite the fact that baby Stephen was breech and absolutely tiny at just 25 weeks gestation. Dr. Laxman should have sent Laura for an emergency C-section, and that's what Laura thought was going to happen, but instead she was told to push, despite not being fully dilated. Laura was crawling up the bed to get away from Dr. Laxman, and she was pulled back down and told to push. I know exactly what it's like with your first baby and your first labour. You have no idea what to expect, it's scary, and you put your full trust in your doctors. You trust that they know what they're talking about. And eventually Laura did push, while Dr. Laxman pulled with excessive force on baby Stephen. Then Laura heard a pop. She had absolutely no idea that that pop was her baby's head detaching from his body. She thought that she'd given birth to her baby, and then she was put to sleep. While she was asleep, she underwent an emergency C-section to remove Stephen's head from her womb. When Laura woke up, she was absolutely distraught after learning about her son's injuries. His head had been sewn back on and he was put on a board so she could say goodbye. She couldn't hold him and she couldn't cuddle him. If that's not all shocking enough, nobody has been held responsible for Stephen's death. Because he was 25 weeks and he didn't draw a breath at birth, he wasn't legally a person. No crime was committed by Dr. Laxman despite the fact that she caused his death, and she was cleared of serious misconduct and allowed to return to work. Laura had baby Stephen cremated and she keeps his ashes in a teddy bear so that she can hold him and cuddle him. Laura also created a petition which she'd really like you to sign. It calls for a change in Scottish law to make sure stillborn babies are given a legal identity. Currently, if a baby's born and they don't take a breath and they pass away, they are not classed as a person, they're not given an identity, and I think that's absolutely shocking. I've tagged Laura's account in the caption and also in the comments, and I would really appreciate it if you could go to her page, find the petition and sign it, because this really needs to change. You also need to go to your email and click the link in that email for your signature to count. Laura's petition is currently at 10,248 signatures, and I'm confident that with your help, we can get it past its next goal of 15,000.
You've probably seen Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell around a lot lately on social media, but this is the full story in case you really don't know what's going on. So Lori was recently sentenced to consecutive life sentences in prison for the murder of her own children, the conspiracy to murder another person, and a slew of other disturbing charges. Lori was born in 1973 in California, and she's been married a number of times. Her first marriage was in 1992 to her high school boyfriend. They divorced shortly after getting married. Then in 1995, when she was 22, she married another man, William. She had a child with him, and then they divorced afterwards. In 2001, she married Joseph Anthony Ryan Jr., and they would have a biological daughter in 2002 named Tylee, who would be one of the murder victims eventually. After their divorce in 2005, in 2007, Lori's brother claimed that Ryan had been very abusive to Lori and the kids. And then in 2018, Ryan was found dead in his apartment from an apparent heart attack. When he was found dead, Lori was his only officially listed next of kin, so she was the only one that was notified that he had died. And it took 5 weeks for his family members to figure out that he was dead. It was in 2006 when Lori married Leland Vallow, who went by the name Charles. Leland was a lifelong Catholic who converted to the Church of Latter-day Saints for Lori. Charles already had 2 children from a previous marriage, but he and Lori decided to adopt his grandnephew, J.J. Vallow, in the year 2013. And in 2014, he moved with Lori and the family to Kauai, Hawaii. So keep in mind that Charles and Lori had a perfectly happy marriage for a while. Charles had converted religions for Lori, and they had even adopted his grandnephew JJ, but there was a storm brewing. This is when Chad Daybell enters the picture. So Chad at the time was a religious author who wrote a series of books titled Standing in Holy Places. Lori became obsessed with Chad's books. She moved her family back from Kauai, Hawaii to Arizona in 2016, and in 2018, while still married to Charles, she went and met Chad at a convention. At this event, Chad told Lori that apparently they had been married in 7 different lifetimes. And afterwards, the two began communicating privately. Shortly after Lori began communicating with Chad privately, her husband Charles went on a business trip, and this allowed Lori to host a private event at the couple's home. Chad Daybell was one of the attendees that Lori had invited, and he shared his bizarre religious beliefs with the group. Chad claimed that he had lived 31 different lives on different planets. He categorized people as either light or dark, claiming that they either had an affiliation with Jesus or Satan, and he even called Lori an eternal being of 21 separate lives. And this is where Lori really went off the deep end with Chad. They began talking, prophesizing about Mormon-influenced doomsday beliefs, talking about the end of the world coming, and Lori Vallow even believed in zombies. I'm not kidding. So the entire time that Lori was meeting with Chad and sharing these beliefs, Charles had no idea what his wife was getting into. And in the year 2019, on a random day, everybody's lives would be shattered. I'm running out of time, so I got to do a part 2. Let me know if you want to hear it.
This is the story of Macy Hogan.
Breathing? No. She's not breathing at all? No. And how old is your daughter? I need you to lie flat on her back on the floor. Can you do that for me now? Ow! Oh. Every time I move, it hurts. Right, but we need to help your daughter if she's not breathing. You need to lie her flat on her back on the floor for me, please.
That was the 999 call of Macy's mother, Cody Ann, and footage of the police breaking into her house. Cody Ann and Paul Hogan had been together since 2010, and 3 years into their relationship, Cody Ann fell pregnant. It was a shock to everyone as the couple hadn't planned on having a baby so young, but they were overjoyed at the fact that Macy was on her way, and she was born in March 2014. The relationship continued, but Cody Ann soon became possessive and controlling, cutting Paul off from family and stopping him going out. On the rare occasion he managed to take Macy to see his mum, he'd be bombarded with phone calls and texts from Cody Ann asking him where he was, when he was coming home. Eventually he had enough and he left the family home. It broke Paul's heart to leave Macy as she was a proper daddy's girl, but he thought that they could be better parents to her apart as the relationship had broken down. Just a week after ending the relationship, Paul's world came crashing down. His daughter Macy had passed away. He was arrested along with Cody Ann, but police soon released him after realising that he wasn't in the house at the time of Macy's death. Cody Ann told police that she'd woken up to find Macy in bed next to her, between two pillows and not breathing. The cruel reality is that Cody Ann had in fact suffocated her daughter and then waited 2 hours before calling 999. When police broke into the home, they found Cody Ann upstairs performing CPR on Macy, but it was clear to paramedics that she was already gone. Cody Ann had multiple self-inflicted superficial wounds to her wrists, neck and chest, and police found a note downstairs written by Cody Ann. It said, "I sit here thinking about killing my daughter and then killing myself. I don't want to leave her behind, but I can't go on either." Cody Ann stood trial for the murder of Macy in July 2017 at Stafford Crown Court. She was still denying murder, but faced with the evidence, including a text that she'd sent to Paul with a picture of Macy and the words, "Save the last photo, possibly see you in court," she broke down in tears in front of a shocked courtroom and confessed to murdering her 2-year-old daughter. On sentencing Cody Ann, Judge Michael Chambers said, "For a mother to kill her very young child, who depends on her for protection above all others, is a wicked and appalling act. This is not a case where you suffered from mental illness. You thought about killing yourself and then decided to kill Macy as well to prevent her from having a life without a mother. This was an expression of utter self-absorption." Cody Ann was found guilty of the murder of Macy and sentenced to a minimum of 16 years.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
Blood-curdling facts that you wish you never knew. Best of 2020, 2021, and 2022. This video shows a man playing Dance Dance Revolution being unknowingly recorded by some people making fun of him. The man, Adam Lanza, 6 months later would shoot his mother in the head while she was asleep and drive to Sandy Hook Elementary School, where he would murder 6 adults and 20 children between the ages of 6 and 7. In the 1960s, scientists attempted to teach dolphins English. However, the experiments were cut short when one of the scientists, Margaret Lavatt, was caught having sex with a dolphin named Peter. She even claimed that Peter initiated it, and after she left, he killed himself. In the 18th century, you could actually bring your cat or dog to the London Zoo and pay your admission by feeding it to the lions. This photo shows 8-month-old Xiao Bao, who is lucky to be alive because his mother stabbed him 80 times after he bit her while she was breastfeeding him. A 46-year-old man found and attacked a 13-year-old boy because he was killing him too many times in a game of Call of Duty. There have been countless cases of people's intestines being sucked out by vacuum toilets on airplanes. So if you want to keep your rectum, be sure to stand up before you flush. A man once donated his recently deceased mother's body for scientific research. Later, he discovered the research facility sold it to the US Army for $5 grand, strapped it to a chair, and blew it up with explosives. There are some Native Americans that sided with the Confederates during the Civil War, and some of them even owned slaves. On New Year's Day, this guy was drunk driving with his friends when they ended up killing 2 people. He then posted this video destroying the memorials of the people they killed and posted it to Twitter, all because his murderer friends were thrown into jail. Yiroko Onaja was in the middle of having sex with his 6th wife when his other wives caught him and became jealous. They forced him to do it with each of them, and he stopped breathing before he could get to the 5th wife. You know that moment when you're about to fall asleep and suddenly you flinch because you feel like you're falling? This is actually known as a hypnic jerk, and it alerts your body that you're dying, or at least thinks that it's dying. This is former NBA player Mark Jackson's basketball card. In the background are the Menendez brothers. They're sitting courtside shortly after killing their parents and just before getting arrested. Right now, at this very moment, there are tiny little bugs munching on your skin. More people have tapeworms than have dogs, which I guess makes them the most popular pet. Oh yeah, and this is what they look like up close. You know how every few pistachios there's always one that tastes a little bit different? Well, it's because there's a dead navel orange worm inside of it. Every single day, someone takes the largest shit in the world and they have no idea that it was them. If you're ever eating crickets, make sure to chew them thoroughly and do not swallow them alive. They have tiny spines on their legs which can cling to your throat and choke you to death. And the most blood-curdling fact of all, this series is over. I'm just kidding, guys. I thought this would be a great chance to tell you guys that I dropped a clothing line called Look Behind You. I've been wearing the clothes all throughout the video. If you're into spooky, creepy, horror type stuff, this brand's definitely for you. Links in my bio if you want to check it out, and don't forget, look behind you.